Hey guys, tonight we drift way, way back before kings, before pyramids, before anyone thought up the word civilization. You're walking barefoot on rough ground, the air sharp with wood smoke and damp soil. A small fire crackles nearby, sparks popping into the darkness. Your stomach growls because dinner is time. Well, let's just say you're not opening an Uber Eats app tonight. No. You're crouching with a group of shaggy-haired hunters and gatherers, and the menu is whatever they manage to dig up, catch, or knock out with a rock. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you re-watching, because somewhere out there, somebody's snacking while you're snoozing. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You grip a rough stick, poking at the fire, watching a grasshopper roast on the embers. Crunchy, nutty, and packed with protein. Insects were on the menu long before fancy protein bars tried to make it cool again. You might hesitate, but hunger always wins, and you pop it in your mouth. The flavor? Like over-toasted sunflower seeds with a faint, smoky aftertaste. Not gourmet, but it beats starving. Roots and tubers are neck-chewy, fibrous, like chewing on a raw carrot but rougher. Someone hands you a handful of bitter berries, half of which could kill you if you pick wrong. That's the daily gamble. Nature doesn't label its produce aisle. The group has an elder who knows which berries stain your lips blue and which ones land you in an early grave. Historians still argue whether early humans learned safe foods mostly by trial and error or by carefully watching animals, but either way, you're grateful someone else already tested the poisonous batch. Tonight's main course, a hunk of roasted marrow bone cracked open with a sharp stone. You scoop out the hot, oily marrow with your fingers, licking the grease. For Stone Age standards, this is rich. Almost luxurious, a calorie bomb your body craves. Imagine eating straight butter when you've been starving all day. Suddenly, bone marrow feels like a feast. The smell of charred meat drifts over. One of the hunters managed to take down a small deer earlier. Strips of venison hang smoking over the fire. You tug at one, teeth sinking into tough fibers. It's stringy, chewy, but your mouth waters because this is a rare treat. Protein is life. You picture the hunters stalking silently for hours, chasing the animal until it collapsed, because back then, humans didn't outmuscle prey, they outsweated them. Marathon runners with spears, basically. Not exactly glamorous, but effective. Of course, sometimes dinner doesn't involve hunting trophies at all. You'd be surprised how many calories come from things we wrinkle our noses at today. Mushrooms, for example, wild fungi harvested cautiously, since a wrong guess could be lethal. Or grubs, fat and wriggly, pulled from under bark. They're rich in fat, smooth and creamy when roasted, like bizarre forest peanut butter. You might gag at first bite, but your body hums with the energy. Survival has a funny way of lowering your standards. Water, that's not guaranteed clean. Streams and ponds look inviting, but could carry parasites. People often let water sit, mixed with herbs or roots, hoping it tasted better or, at least, didn't kill them. If you're imagining fancy caveman smoothies, slow down. It's more like swamp-flavored tea, but it kept you alive. Every meal here is a gamble, and you notice something? Food isn't just about flavor. It's about ritual, sharing, and survival. The fire ring is the center of community warmth, protection, and the dinner table rolled into one. Everyone sits close, swapping bites, trading stories in grunts and gestures. You realize food has always been social glue, long before Instagram dinners. A quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists think people occasionally stashed honey in animal stomachs, letting it ferment into a protomead. Imagine stumbling across that sticky, tangy surprise. Accidentally inventing alcohol must have been both delightful and disastrous. Cheerful laughter 1 minute, stumbling into a thorn bush the next. And yes, you probably wouldn't survive that hangover without aspirin. Your belly fills slowly. Though you still not satisfied, Stone Age meals rarely gave that full feeling we take for granted. Constant foraging was the rule. You picture yourself waking at dawn, trudging out to scan for edible leaves, insects, or a lucky rabbit. The average day, walking miles and miles, pockets stuffed with whatever you could chew later. It's less 3 meals a day and more snack until you collapse. A mainstream fact slides in here. Evidence from stone tools and fire pits suggests humans were roasting meat at least 1 million years ago. Controlled fire wasn't just warmth, it was flavor technology. Cooking unlocked nutrients, made chewing easier, and probably gave us the brain boost to become, well, us. Without fire, you wouldn't be sitting here listening to bedtime history at all. One debate lingers, though. Did people in this era deliberately season food, or was taste entirely accidental? Some historians point to charred plant remains, like mustard seeds, that might mean prehistoric folks already understood seasoning. Others argue it's wishful thinking, that these were just weeds caught in the fire. Historians still argue whether your Stone Age ancestors were proto-chefs or just lucky. Personally, I like to imagine a cave teenager saying, "Hey, throw that weird seed in. It might taste less boring." By the end of the night, you're stretched out near the fire, belly humming with bugs, roots, and smoky marrow. It's not glamorous, but you feel connected, tied into the rhythm of survival. The hum of cicadas, the snap of firewood. You chuckle, realizing your snack tonight would horrify most modern food critics. Stone Age tapas, roasted cricket with marrow dip. Michelin star incoming? Probably not. But your ancestors may do, and in the grand scheme of history, they didn't do too badly. You're proof of that. As your eyes grow heavy, one last thought lingers. The taste of history begins here, not with feasts or golden banquets, but with people huddled in the dark, chewing on whatever nature grudgingly offered. And if you thought roasted grasshoppers were weirdo, just wait until Egyptian brewers hand you their beer made with breadcrumbs. Dawn breaks, and you rub smoke from your eyes, stumbling out from the circle of last night's campfire. But tonight's history story doesn't keep you wandering forever with bugs and marrow. Instead, you take a deep breath, because the ground under your feet has changed. You're standing on soil packed down by bare human feet, right at the edge of a tiny village. The Stone Age shuffle is giving way to something revolutionary: farming. And with farming comes the first attempts at consistent flavor, if you can call it that. You look around and see rows of short, scraggly plants: wheat, barley, maybe millet. They don't look like much yet, but compared to chasing gazelles all day, this is paradise. The first farmers learned quickly. Grain meant storage. And storage meant winter didn't automatically equal starving. You grab a handful of the hard kernels, and immediately your teeth ache. Raw grains are basically like chewing gravel. So what did they do? They ground them between heavy stones, making a gritty powder, something you could boil into porridge or bake into the first versions of bread. And let's talk bread. Forget fluffy baguettes and buttered toast. Early bread was flat, dense, and tasted like someone pressed wet sand into a cracker. You chew, and grit crunches between your teeth, bits of stone from the grinding process. Dentists today know this ancient bread wore down enamel like sandpaper. So yes, early agriculture gave you food security, but it also gave you a mouthful of broken molars. Lucky trade-off, right? Still, you're hungry, and as steam rises from a clay pot, you're handed a wooden bowl of boiled grains. The porridge is bland, slightly nutty, with a bitter aftertaste from husks not fully removed. But it's warm, and it fills your belly in a way scattered berries never could. You spoon more in, realizing this simple mush was the backbone of early civilization. Some households have more variety: beans, peas, lentils, maybe a few onions or garlic bulbs tucked into the corner of a hut. And occasionally, if they're lucky, there's goat's milk. Imagine sipping warm, slightly sour milk straight from the animal. No refrigeration, no pasteurization. The taste is sharp. Funky your modern stomach might lurch, but the protein is a lifesaver. Farmers discovered cheese almost by accident, when milk carried in animal stomach pouches curdled naturally. The result? Lumpy, salty curds that actually tasted better than spoiled milk. A happy accident that still fills supermarket aisles today. You glance at the village hearth, where flatbread is slapped against hot stones. The smell is smoky, comforting, with a faint nuttiness. You rip off a piece, dip it into a stew of lentils and herbs, and suddenly you're tasting the first whisper of cuisine flavors layered together, not just survival snacks. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists think people even flavored beer before they baked bread. That's right, fermented grain mush, slightly fizzy, slightly sour, and more filling than water. Historians still argue whether beer was invented as an accident or a priority. But many like to joke that farming spread because people wanted a reliable bar. Still, not everything here is paradise. Food goes bad fast. You bite into dried fish left too long in the sun, and the stench alone makes your eyes water. Without fridges or salt mines, people relied on smoke, drying, or burying food underground. Sometimes it worked. Other times, dinner meant a side of food poisoning. Imagine a village meeting. Who wants to test the mystery stew? No volunteers. Rock, paper, scissors. Domestic animals add to the menu. Chickens cluck nearby, offering eggs, though they're smaller and tougher than today's. Pigs root around, fattened on scraps, eventually turning into slow-roasted pork. The fat sizzles over fire, dripping into flames, sending out a mouth-watering aroma. Your stomach growls, because no matter the century, bacon is bacon. But in this world, a single pig is too valuable to kill casually. Meat is celebration food, not Tuesday night dinner. And meals aren't just about eating. They're about rhythm. Farming ties you to the seasons, and suddenly taste is connected to time. Fresh peas in spring, grain harvest in summer, dried fruits in winter. No supermarkets importing mangoes in January. Your plate reflects the turning of the earth. You realize food calendars were humanity's first real schedule, etched into stomachs long before clocks. Sometimes you get lucky and stumble across wild honey. A thick, golden drip of sweetness after months of bitter greens and plain porridge. The moment it hits your tongue, your brain lights up like fireworks. Sweetness is rare, treasured, and addictive. You imagine villagers hoarding combs, doling them out sparingly. One sticky taste reminds you why honey became sacred in so many myths. Of course, early farming has drawbacks. Compared to the varied hunter diet, here you're eating grain-heavy meals day in and day out. Malnutrition creeps in. Weaker bones, shorter stature, more diseases. Historians still argue whether switching to farming was genius or a huge mistake. We got villages, but we also got cavities, bad backs, and way too much porridge. You rub your teeth with your tongue, already feeling that phantom grit again. A mainstream fact. The world's oldest known bread, found in Jordan, dates back over 14,000 years older than agriculture itself. It seems some clever foragers baked flatbread long before they planted wheat. Which flips the story. Maybe people didn't settle down to invent bread, they settled down because bread was already worth sticking around for. Talk about carb motivation. A fringe tidbit. Some scholars think clay pots weren't first for cooking, but for brewing. Picture a clay jar bubbling with fermenting barley. Villagers cautiously sipping and realizing, hey, this makes me feel funny. Whether true or not, it paints a hilarious image. Farming fueled not by bread, but by the promise of a buzz. Your day in the village continues. You help grind grain, stir stew, taste goat cheese that smells like sweaty socks. You share meals seated on mats, no forks or spoons, just fingers tearing bread to scoop up bites. Children chase chickens, dogs sneak scraps, and everyone chews the same mush in unison. Somehow, even with grit grinding in your teeth, The food feels homier than last night's random bugs. It's not about excitement, it's about knowing you'll eat again tomorrow. As dusk falls, fires glow against mud brick walls, and smoke drifts lazily into the sky. You sit back, belly stretched from porridge and flatbread, head buzzing lightly from a sip of cloudy, sour beer. It's not a feast, but it's stability. And you realize the taste of history has shifted. No more constant wandering, no more guessing which berry kills you. Instead, you've traded variety for certainty, freedom for food security. Whether that was a win or a loss, well, that's still debated. You curl up on a woven mat, breadcrumbs still clinging to your fingers, and drift off to sleep. Tomorrow, you'll rise with the sun, grind more grain, boil more porridge. The meals might be bland, but they're predictable. And maybe that predictability is what built the first steps toward everything else in history. Still, admit it. Part of you misses the roasted crickets. The air thickens with warmth, and you squint against a golden glare that bounces off sandstone blocks rising higher than your neck cranes. You're no longer in the modest huts of farmers. This time, you've landed in the Nile Valley. The buzz of cicadas mixes with the splash of water wheels, and the sweet scent of onions hits your nose before you even realize you're in ancient Egypt. Here, food is more than fuel status. It's ritual. It's daily life carved into stone reliefs. And lucky you, tonight you get a front row seat to both the workman's rations and the royal feasts. A worker passes you a rough loaf of bread. It's dark, dense, studded with bits of husk. You tear off a chunk and chew. It's gritty, almost sandy, because their grinding stones still shed tiny particles that crunch between your molars. Egyptians lived with it every day. But bread wasn't just food, it was currency. Imagine working all day hauling blocks for a pyramid, and instead of a paycheck, you're handed loaves. Some archaeologists literally call bread and beer the minimum wage of ancient Egypt. You chew thoughtfully, realizing your dental plan here would be terrible. And yes, beer always beer. But don't picture a crisp, cold pint with a foamy head. This version is thick, cloudy, and sweet. Brewed from fermented barley loaves crumbled into water. It tastes closer to liquid porridge than anything you'd order at a pub. You sip, the texture coating your tongue, and instantly understand. Beer here wasn't just a drink, it was a staple food. Children drank it, priests blessed it. And it gave the labor force enough calories to keep dragging giant stones under the desert sun. You wipe foam from your lips well, more like froth and notice onions piled nearby. Egyptians adored onions, not only for flavor, but for their symbolism. The round layers represented eternity, so they were offered in tombs, tucked under bandages of mummies, and eaten in daily meals. You bite into a raw one, sharp and pungent, and suddenly your eyes sting. Tears stream down your face, and someone claps you on the back, laughing. Welcome to the club. Egyptian diets were heavy on onions, garlic, and leeks. If you think modern garlic breath is bad, imagine a whole civilization reeking together. Next comes fish, pulled fresh from the Nile. Some are roasted, others salted and dried. You bite into one, savoring smoky, briny flavors. The bones crunch uncomfortably, but the taste is hearty, filling. Fish was a commoner's protein, cheap and abundant. But beware, the Nile also held dangers. Crocodiles lurked in the reeds, and fishermen risked their lives casting nets. You picture a poor fisherman balancing on a papyrus skiff, scanning the water nervously. Dinner or death, all in one outing. Meanwhile, if you wander toward the palace, the menu transforms entirely. Royal banquets showcase geese, ducks, beef, even honey-glazed delicacies. Honey here is liquid gold, reserved for the wealthy. You dip a fig into it, the sweetness exploding across your tongue. For a moment, you forget gritty bread and swampy beer. This is luxury. And then someone brings out lotus wine, fragrant and floral, brewed from the blossoms floating on the Nile. You sip carefully. It's sweeter than the beer, perfumed, almost intoxicating in aroma alone. But here's where it gets quirky. Egyptians also believed in magical foods. Crocodile dung, mixed into pastes, was sometimes used in fertility rituals. Imagine that: honey for dessert and crocodile dung for a romance. You wrinkle your nose, but hey, they swore by it. Historians still argue whether these practices were widespread or limited to symbolic rituals. But either way, it makes you grateful your own medicine cabinet doesn't include reptile droppings. One jar, food wasn't just about eating. It was tied to religion. Priests offered loaves, beer, and cuts of meat to the gods daily. Statues of deities were fed meals, which later went to the temple staff. You picture a god statue smirking as offerings pile up, while the priests sneak bites once the ritual ends. The divine dined first, mortals second. A mainstream fact: archaeologists have uncovered actual loaves of bread sealed inside tombs. Still charred, but recognizable after thousands of years. That's how central food was to the Egyptian afterlife. You couldn't journey without snacks. A quirky fringe idea. Some researchers suggest workers on pyramid crews had such steady rations of beer and bread that they were healthier than average peasants. So yes, in a weird twist, the guys hauling stones might have eaten better than the farmers they left behind. As night falls, music drifts through the air. Drums, flutes, laughter. You recline on a mat at a noble's feast. Slaves bring platters piled high. Roasted goose stuffed with herbs, bowls of dates, almonds, cucumbers. Tear off a piece of goose, the skin crackling, fat dripping down your fingers. It's tender, rich, nothing like the tough venison of your Stone Age supper. You sip lotus wine again, cheeks warm, while dancers whirl in the torchlight. For a fleeting moment, you could swear you're royalty. But just outside the palace walls, workers huddle around their own fires, gnawing on onions and bread crusts, sipping their daily beer rations. The contrast is sharp, and you realize food here is not just survival, it's hierarchy carved into every bite. What you eat depends entirely on who you are. A farmer tastes grit and onion tears. A noble tastes honey and roasted goose. The pyramid may rise toward heaven, but stomachs are what hold society together. Historians still argue whether Egyptian beer should be considered more a liquid bread or an actual alcoholic beverage. The truth probably lies in between: not got you full, got you tipsy, and got you through another endless day under the sun. And while modern palates might scoff at gritty loaves and soupy brews, remember, they built monuments so massive that even your camera phone can't capture them fully, powered almost entirely by carbs and beer. You stretch out under the desert stars, belly full of bread, beer, onions, and maybe a stolen bite of honey. The night air is warm, buzzing with crickets, and the Nile flows steadily nearby. Your eyelids droop, and you realize food here isn't just a matter of taste, it's a story carved into every loaf, every jug, every offering to the gods. Sleep tugs at you, but one thought lingers. If this is Egypt's flavor, just wait until you step into Mesopotamia's kitchen, where the world's oldest recipes are literally carved in clay. You blink awake, and instead of the Nile's glittering surface, you're staring at broad rivers with muddy banks, reed-filled marshes, and the hum of irrigation canals. Welcome to Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. The air smells faintly of clay, grain, and sheep. Here, civilization is bubbling up in full force, and the kitchen is no exception. Tonight, you're about to taste history's first real recipes, literally carved into clay tablets. No Instagram reels, no Pinterest boards, just cuneiform scribbles baked onto slabs that outlived their cooks by thousands of years. A woman hands you a steaming bowl. It's thick stew made of lamb simmered with garlic, onions, and leeks. You lift it to your nose, savory, almost like something you'd smell in a rustic tavern today. You take a sip. Rich broth coats your tongue, the meat tender, softened by slow boiling. It feels familiar, strangely modern. And here's the kicker. Some of these Mesopotamian recipes date back 4,000 years, making them the world's oldest written cookbooks. You smile into your bowl, realizing that long before celebrity chefs, someone here was scribbling down. Step 1. Stew the lamb. Bread makes its inevitable appearance, though in Mesopotamia it comes in astonishing variety. Archaeologists have identified over 50 types, from plain barley loaves to ones sprinkled with sesame seeds. You tear off a piece, dip it into your stew, and chew. Nutty, soft, and warm, it balances the salty meat broth. You grin, it feels like comfort food. And yes, sesame was already on the scene, brought in from distant lands, giving these ancient loaves an exotic touch. Imagine being the baker who first said, "Let's sprinkle seeds on this," and changed bread forever. You glance at the kitchen hearth. Clay ovens glowing, smoke trailing upward. Pots bubble, meat spits over fire, and women stir stews with long ladles. The smells mingle: garlic, cumin, coriander. Mesopotamians didn't just eat to live. They cared about taste. You nibble a roasted onion wedge soaked in broth, and suddenly you're grateful. Compared to Egypt's onion-on-bread monotony, this is a banquet. And speaking of banquets, Mesopotamian kings knew how to throw one. Imagine hundreds of guests reclining on mats, musicians playing lyres, while servers bring endless trays. Roasted lamb, pigeons stuffed with herbs, figs drizzled with date syrup, and jugs of barley beer passed hand to hand. You sip the beer again, thick, cloudy, with straws sticking out of tall jars. Why straws? To avoid the floating chunks of grain and foam. You take a pull, malty, sour, slightly fizzy. Not your favorite, but you can't deny it keeps the mood lively. One quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found poems praising beer, literally hymns to Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing. Lines describing barley soaking, fermenting, becoming beer for the people. Imagine singing about your drink every morning. Latte goddess, you frothy savior. Humanity hasn't changed much. We still write odes to caffeine. Back in the market, the scents overwhelm you. Baskets of dates pile high, sweet, sticky, like caramel in fruit form. You bite into one, and sugar bursts across your tongue. No wonder Mesopotamians adored them. Date syrup was their honey, stirred into stews, drizzled over bread, fermented into wine. Your fingers glue together instantly, and you lick them clean, smiling at this ancient dessert. But Mesopotamian meals weren't all indulgence. Grain ruled everything. Barley, especially, was ground into flour, baked into bread, boiled into porridge, brewed into beer. It was life itself. If harvests failed, famine followed. You overhear murmurs of offerings to the gods, barley laid on temple altars, prayers whispered to ensure rains. Historians still argue whether grain taxes or religious devotion came first. But either way, food and faith were braided tighter than a baker's loaf. You're handed a skewer of roasted pigeon, the skin crisp, the meat tender. You take a bite, gamey, juicy, surprisingly good. Birds were common fare, easier to raise and cook than larger animals. Yet cows and sheep filled the higher tables. You picture a temple priest sacrificing a ram, then feasting afterward. The gods first, the humans second, sound familiar. Egypt set the trend, but Mesopotamia took it seriously. Here's a mainstream fact. In 1950s Iraq, archaeologists uncovered cuneiform tablets from around 1750 BCE, listing actual stew recipes. They call for lamb, onions, garlic, leeks, and herbs we still use today. That connection, tasting something close to what they cooked millennia ago, sends a chill down your spine. Your bowl feels like a time machine. Here's a quirky tidbit. Clay beer receipts have been found, tallying up jugs owed to workers. Imagine clocking out after a long day digging canals, only to wave a tablet saying, "Yes." 2 beers are on the boss. The world's first bar tabs, immortalized in clay. Humanity really hasn't changed. Of course, not every dish here is comforting. Some meals are downright strange. You're offered a chunk of cheese, sharp and crumbly, maybe sheep or goat milk curdled with vinegar. It crumbles in your fingers, salty and pungent. You chew slowly, trying not to wince. Cheesemaking was still experimental, and not every batch turned out great. If you imagine someone wrinkling their nose at your snack and muttering, well, at least it won't kill you. Historians still argue whether ordinary peasants had access to these seasoned stews, or if that was strictly for elites. Some suggest common folk ate plain barley mush most of the time, while nobles dined on lamb stews with garlic and coriander. Your own experience tonight swings wildly. One moment sweet dates, the next gritty porridge. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between rich or poor. Everyone got some taste of flavor, even if it wasn't daily. The night thickens, and lamps glow in the feasting hall. Music rises, laughter bubbles, and platters keep coming. You lean back, belly full of stew, bread, dates, and too much beer. Your head spins, not unpleasantly. You're surrounded by the hum of humanity's first real kitchens, the birthplace of recipes, spices, culinary ambition. Somewhere nearby, a scribe scratches another tablet. A list of ingredients, maybe a hymn, maybe just a bar bill. You realize you're watching food evolve from survival to art. And as your eyes grow heavy, you catch one last whiff of simmering stew, garlic-rich and earthy. The clay ovens crackle. The river flows quietly outside. And Mesopotamian cooks carry on their endless dance of stirring, seasoning, and serving. You drift off, thinking, if Egypt fed you grit and onions, Mesopotamia fed you flavor carved in clay. And if you thought stews and date syrup were exciting, wait until philosophers start lecturing you about moderation, while you're literally lying sideways at a Greek banquet. You stir, the smell of olive oil hitting your nose before your eyes even open. This time, the air is salty, breezy, tinged with sea spray. Welcome to ancient Greece, where eating is never just about filling your stomach, it's about philosophy, politics, and maybe a little bit of showing off. You roll onto your side and realize you're not sitting at a smoky peasant fire anymore. You're reclining, half lying on a couch at a symposium, the classic Greek dinner party. And yes, they really did eat lying down, propped on one elbow like it was the most natural thing in the world. Try that at your own kitchen table and see how it goes. Someone hands you a small bowl of olives. They're wrinkled, briny, glossy with oil. You pop one into your mouth, savoring the sharp, salty bite. Olives are Greece's pride and joy, the very trees considered gifts from Athena herself. You chew slowly, knowing this fruit and its oil would fuel not only Greek stomachs, but their trade and culture for centuries. Bread appears next, flat, chewy, still warm. You dip it into olive oil, rich and golden, and suddenly you understand why Greek cuisine has survived millennia, almost unchanged. Cheese makes an early entrance too. A hunk of goat cheese, white, crumbly, tangy. It pairs perfectly with the olives and bread, simple but satisfying. This trio, bread, olives, cheese, into just dinner. Its identity. Farmers, soldiers, even philosophers snacked on this exact spread while debating the meaning of justice. You take another bite and imagine Socrates, oil on his beard, saying, "The unexamined snack is not worth eating." But not all Greeks dined equally. Commoners often ate porridge made from barley, boiled into a thick mush called maza. You take a spoonful, heavy, bland, with a faint, nutty taste. It sticks to your ribs, but you can see why peasants survived on it. It's filling, cheap, and dependable. Add a drizzle of honey and it's dessert. Add onions and it's dinner. Not glamorous, but practical. The symposium table, though, offers much more. Platters arrive, figs, juicy and sweet. Grapes, plump and bursting. Roasted chickpeas sprinkled with herbs. You nibble on a fig, its sticky sweetness coating your fingers, and then reach for a cluster of grapes. The juice runs down your chin, and you laugh softly. Fruit here isn't background decoration, it's centerpiece. Seasonal, local, intensely flavorful. Wine flows constantly, but here's the twist. Greeks thought drinking pure wine was barbaric. They always mixed it with water, often 2 or 3 parts water to 1 part wine. You sip from a kylix, the wide wine cup, and taste the diluted tang lighter, almost refreshing. To drink unmixed wine.
How was?
For uncivilized foreigners. So tonight, you're civilized, at least in your cup. And as the symposium warms, conversation sparks. Philosophers argue about moderation, warning that gluttony dulls the mind. You can't help but smirk, easy to say, while chewing olives on a fancy couch. A mainstream fact. Plato himself wrote about symposiums, describing how wine and conversation tested the balance between pleasure and wisdom. Your bowl of grapes suddenly feels like part of a grand experiment in virtue. But Greek food isn't just about luxury, it's also about the sea. You're handed a slice of grilled fish, its skin crispy, flesh flaking apart. The taste is smoky, delicate, with a squeeze of lemon-like citrus. Yes, they had sour fruits. Seafood was abundant, and Greek cities hugged the coast for a reason. You chew, staring at the horizon, and realize the Aegean wasn't just their highway, was their pantry. Quirky tidbit. Archaeologists found evidence of octopus being pounded against rocks to tenderize it before cooking. Picture a Greek fisherman smacking a slimy octopus over and over on a stone. Neighbors yelling, "Keep it down, we're trying to philosophize here." You taste a small bite of boiled octopus, rubbery but briny, and can't decide if you're impressed or grossed out. The symposium continues. A platter of lentils arrives, simmered with onions and herbs. You spoon some onto bread, earthy, hearty, filling. Lentils were poor man's fare, but even philosophers praised them. Diogenes, the cranky philosopher who lived in a barrel, was said to eat lentil soup almost exclusively. You chuckle. Live simply, he preached, while you sneak another honeyed fig. Balance, right? Historians still argue whether Greek banquets were truly about food or just excuses for politics and debate. Some say the meals were modest, the focus on conversation. Others believe the food was lavish, a way for elites to flaunt wealth. From your couch, chewing olives and fish, sipping watered wine while listening to men argue about virtue, feels like both. Food is fuel, but also theater. Then comes dessert. Not sugar-heavy cake. Sugar wouldn't arrive until centuries later. Instead, honey rules. Honey drizzled over cheese. Honey cakes made from flour and oil. Honey mixed into nuts. You bite into a sesame honey bar, chewy and sweet, and suddenly you realize, this is ancient Greek candy. Your teeth stick together, and you grin through the sugar buzz. The night wears on. Music swells, flutes and lyres filling the air. Dancers sway, servants refill cups. You lean back, belly warm with bread, olives, cheese, fish, figs, and honey. The conversations blur into laughter, and you feel yourself drifting. Greek meals were about community, about balance, about finding harmony between hunger and thought. One last detail before your eyes close. You catch sight of a poor farmer outside the villa, eating his maza porridge by lamplight, while inside philosophers argue about moderation over platters of figs. That contrast lingers. Food here isn't just taste, it's philosophy. It's politics, it's who you are. As you slide into sleep, you chuckle softly. Remember the Egyptians' onion breath. Tonight, you've got olive oil breath. And if you think Greek moderation was intense, just wait until Rome invites you to dinner. Because Romans didn't do moderation. They did excess, sometimes with a side of fermented fish sauce. You blink awake, stomach still heavy with olives and figs, only to find yourself sprawled in a new setting. The couch beneath you is softer, richer embroidered cushions, polished wood. The air hums with laughter, clinking cups, and the faint, unmistakable tempts of something fishy. Welcome to Rome, where eating is less about philosophy and more about spectacle. If Greece gave the world thoughtful meals, Rome decided to crank the volume to 11. Your first whiff of Roman dining is garum fermented fish sauce. Imagine soy sauce, Worcestershire, and a dumpster behind a seafood restaurant on a hot day. Yeah, Romans poured this on everything. Bread, meat, even desserts. You dip a chunk of bread into it, bracing yourself. The flavor hits salty, sharp, oddly addictive. You take another bite, then another. Against all odds, it's good. Dangerous, good. You glance around the table and realize this sauce was liquid gold. Traders carried jars across the empire, and rich families bragged about their private garum recipes. Bread again plays center stage. Romans ate bread like modern folks scroll their phones constantly, almost without thinking. You tear into a round, crusty loaf. The inside is chewy, the crust smoky from wood-fired ovens. Bakers marked each loaf with stamps, kind of like brand logos, so customers knew whose bread they were buying. Imagine flexing with a Gucci handbag, but in Rome, it's your stamped loaf of wheat. Of course, bread alone wouldn't do for the elite. The platters start rolling in. First, bowls of olives, then roasted nuts, dusted with honey, crunchy and sweet. You pop one in your mouth and try not to make a mess as sticky syrup coats your fingers. A servant offers wine, but remember the Greeks' watered-down rule. Romans broke it. They often drank it stronger, sometimes mixing with honey and spices, making it almost like mulled wine. You take a sip, warmth spreading through your chest, and already sense why banquets here got chaotic. A mainstream fact. Elite Roman banquets could last hours, sometimes days, with guests reclining on couches in trios around low tables. The food wasn't just nourishment, it was theater. Your host shows off wealth by parading exotic dishes: peacock tongues, dormice stuffed with nuts, flamingo roasted with herbs. Yes, flamingo. You take a cautious bite of roasted bird that tastes suspiciously like chicken, but comes with the bragging rights of pink feathers. Then there's the infamous dormouse. A tiny rodent, plumped up, roasted, served on a platter. You stare at it, reminding yourself this is PG-13 history, but curiosity wins. You nibble. Nutty, savory, oddly tender. You sigh, whispering, "Don't tell anyone I liked that," and move on quickly. Not all Romans lived this lavishly. Most citizens, soldiers, and slaves relied on a humble porridge called pulse made from spelt or barley, cooked with water or milk. You take a spoonful, bland, earthy, a little gluey. Add some beans or scraps of meat and it's heartier, but it's clear why elites flaunted peacock while commoners slurped mush. Food mirrored social class with brutal clarity. And then fruit, grapes, apples, plums, figs. You bite into a fresh fig, its honey sweetness bursting, sticky juice dripping onto your hand. Dried fruits were just as common, packed for long journeys or stored for winter. You chew thoughtfully, imagining Roman legions marching across Europe with sacks of raisins swinging from their belts. Quirky tidbit. Romans believed cabbage cured almost everything: hangovers, stomach aches, even bad moods. Before wine-heavy banquets, some would munch raw cabbage leaves to prepare their stomachs. You picture toga-clad elites gnawing lettuce heads like rabbits before diving into a plate of flamingo. You try a leaf yourself, bitter, crunchy, not exactly festive. But hey, maybe your belly will thank you later. Fish dominates the banquet too. You're served slices of mullet, grilled with herbs, delicate and tender. Some dishes feature eel, oily and rich. Romans prized exotic seafood so much that fresh fish were sometimes carried hundreds of miles in tanks with constant water changes. Imagine the logistics. An ancient Uber Eats, but for live eels. The flavors are bold. Honey and vinegar balance each other in sauces. Pepper expensive, imported from India spices almost everything. You bite into a dish of pork drizzled with honey and sprinkled with pepper, the sweet and spicy clash waking up your tongue. Roman palates loved contrast. Sweet with savory, sour with rich. It's like a culinary boxing match in your mouth. Historians still argue whether the excesses we read about hold banquets with 50 courses. Vomitoriums where guests supposedly purged to eat more were exaggerated. Some say it's satire, mocking gluttony. Others believe the elites truly indulged in grotesque feasts. You glance at your overflowing plate and think, maybe the truth is somewhere in the crumbs. Wine keeps flowing, now spiced with saffron, now chilled with snow dragged from mountains. You sip cautiously, head swimming. Romans valued wine almost like currency, even paying soldiers with rations of it. But unlike Greek moderation, Roman cups often tilted a little too far. You spot a guest dancing clumsily near the musicians and chuckle. 2,000 years and party behavior hasn't changed. Dessert time. Honey cakes again, layered with nuts, crunchy and sticky. Pastries fried in oil, sprinkled with sesame. Fresh pears poached in wine. You bite into a honey-soaked pastry, hot and chewy, and sigh happily. Sugar hadn't yet reached Europe, but honey kept Roman sweet teeth satisfied. Then comes the spectacle. Entertainment. Musicians play, dancers whirl. Maybe even gladiators spar in miniature for wealthy amusement. You recline, belly full, lulled by music and wine. Food here isn't just taste, it's performance, status, empire on a plate. One last quirky moment. A servant brings you lettuce after the meal. Why, Romans thought lettuce made you sleepy. You crunch a leaf, its watery crispness, oddly refreshing after honey and wine. Maybe it works, because your eyelids grow heavy. As you drift, one last thought lingers. Romans ruled an empire not just with armies, but with appetites. Bread and circuses kept the masses entertained. The phrase bread and circuses wasn't a joke hit, was policy. Feed the people, distract them, and they won't revolt. You chew your last bite of bread and realize, this empire ran as much on loaves as on legions. You yawn, reclining deeper. Remember that Greek octopus being pounded against rocks. Romans would slathered it in garum and served it proudly. And if you think Rome was extravagant, wait until you're handed a medieval trench of stale bread dripping with meat juices in the next stop. Different era, different vibe, but always the same hungry human story. You stir from your Roman couch, still tasting the honeyed pastries and that unforgettable tang of garum, only to find yourself sitting on something very different. It's rough, uneven, and a little stale. You blink and realize you're perched on what looks like a giant slice of bread. Except this isn't for eating. This is your plate. Welcome to the medieval feast, where dishes are often served on trencher-thick slabs of dialed bread. That soak up the juices of whatever messy concoction gets ladled onto them. Yes, your tableware is edible. And no, you don't get to complain about dishwashing after. The hall is dimly lit by flickering torches and a smoky fire. A long wooden table stretches across the room, piled with meats, pies, and tankards. Around you, nobles chatter and laugh while servants dart between them. The air smells of roasted meat, spiced wine, and a faint tang of unwashed wool cloaks. You run a hand over your trencher, already greasy. Embrace yourself. The first dish arrives, pottage. A thick, soupy stew of whatever's on hand: cabbage, carrots, onions, barley, maybe a shred of pork if it's a lucky day. You spoon some into your mouth, and it's hearty, filling, a little bland but comforting. For peasants, this wasn't just a dish. It was the dish. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner could all be the same bubbling pot simmering over the fire. You sigh contentedly, sticks to your ribs like glue. But nobles, like the ones here, they'd get more variety. A platter of roasted venison is carried in, the smell rich and smoky. You cut a slice, juices dripping onto your trencher. The meat is tender, flavored with spices like cinnamon and cloves. Yes, spices, though rare and costly, were prized by the wealthy. You take a bite, the sweet and savory clash, making your tongue dance. Suddenly, the pottage seems less exciting. Mainstream fact. Spices like pepper, nutmeg, and cinnamon traveled from Asia to Europe along long trade routes, costing literal fortunes. A bag of pepper could be worth a worker's yearly wage. To sprinkle pepper on your venison wasn't just flavor, it was showing off wealth and connections. You chew slowly, thinking. In this hall, your status is practically measured by how spicy your meat is. For commoners, though, bread was the backbone. Dark, coarse loaves made from rye or barley for the poor. Finer white bread for the rich. You tear a hunk of your trencher, taste the sour chew, and imagine how many lives revolved around the cycle of planting, harvesting, and grinding grain. Miss one harvest, and the village starves. You bite again, quietly thankful for your imaginary role as a noble guest. Quirky tidbit. Sometimes trenchers weren't eaten by the diners at all. They soaked up sauces and juices, then were gathered and given to servants or the poor. So yes, your half-gnawed bread plate might end up as charity. You look down at the greasy slab in your hands and wonder if someone's dinner tomorrow depends on your messy table manners. The feast grows livelier. Jugs of ale and mead are passed around. You lift a wooden tankard to your lips, the ale malty bitter with a slight fizz. Mead fermented honey water follows, sweet and warming. Soon the room echoes with laughter, slurred songs, and the clatter of knives. One joke too many about knights and turnips makes you nearly spit out your drink. A server places a pie before you, steam escaping as it's sliced. Inside, minced beef, onions, raisins, and spices. Sweet and savory again, an unmistakable medieval combo. You take a bite, the raisins surprisingly pleasant against the meat. Another pie arrives, but this one isn't what you expect. Pigeon pie, complete with little bird legs poking from the crust. You hesitate, then cut in. The meat is gamey, chewy, and you can't decide whether to be impressed or unsettled. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly ate as poorly as stereotypes suggest. Some evidence shows a surprisingly balanced diet with vegetables, legumes, and grains forming the bulk of meals. Others argue that nobles gorged on meat while peasants barely scraped by. You look at your plate, split between cabbage stew and spiced venison, and realize the truth might sit somewhere between. Fish makes an appearance too. It's Friday, so out comes salted cod, boiled until soft. You bite into the flaky white meat. It's salty, a little tough, but edible. With the church enforcing fasting days where meat was banned, fish became a staple, even in landlocked villages. Preservation by salting or drying was key. You chew thoughtfully, imagining barrels of cod hauled from the North Sea to kitchens across Europe. Dessert arrives, marchpane. A thick almond paste, molded into shapes and decorated with sugar, if the host can afford it. You nibble a small piece, sits, nutty, sweet, rich. Not everyone could indulge in such treats, but for nobles, sugar and almonds meant prestige. You lick your fingers, sticky and satisfied. The atmosphere shifts as entertainment begins. A jester tumbles into the hall, bells jingling, cracking jokes that make you snort into your ale. Musicians strike up lutes and pipes, and dancers swirl between the tables. You lean back, belly warm, head fuzzy, and realize food here isn't just sustenance, it's community. Celebration, distraction from long winters and short lifespans. Quirky moment. You notice your neighbor dipping bread into mustard so sharp it makes his eyes water. Medieval mustard wasn't the mild yellow squeeze bottle kind. It was fiery enough to clear your sinuses. You try it, cough, and laugh. Definitely not for the faint of heart. As the feast winds down, servants collect trenchers, carrying the greasy bread plates away. You imagine them ending up at the castle gates, handed out to beggars, still heavy with sauce and meat juices. Your last bite tastes of venison, mustard, and smoky bread. It lingers on your tongue as the hall grows quiet. You slump against the table, full and a little dazed. Medieval dining was rough, messy, communal. Forks weren't common yet. Fingers did most of the work. And yet, there's comfort here: hot food, laughter, music, a shared table. You yawn, thinking back. Remember the Roman dormouse. At least tonight's pigeons had feathers to warn you first. Your eyes grow heavy. The torches flicker. The hall fades. Tomorrow, you'll wake somewhere new. Maybe with a pewter spoon in your hand and porridge on your tongue. But for now, you let yourself drift, belly heavy with bread, meat, and ale. You wake to the muffled cries of seagulls and the sharp tank of smoke from a seaside hearth. This time, you're in Viking territory, somewhere along a rugged Scandinavian fjord. The wind bites your cheeks as you trudge toward a longhouse. Its timber walls smoky, the smell of peat fire mingling with salt water. Dinner here isn't about sophistication. It's about survival, warmth, and keeping your belly full enough to endure harsh winters. But Vikings had their own kind of indulgence, and tonight, you're going to taste it all. Inside, the longhouse is crowded with warriors, farmers, and a few children. Flames leap from the central hearth, illuminating rough-hewn benches and tables littered with bowls of porridge, plates of salted fish, and scraps of dried meat. You grab a wooden bowl, watching a servant ladle a thick barley porridge, and take a cautious bite. It's hot, bland, and sticky, clinging to your tongue like glue. But that stickiness is life. It keeps you warm, fills your stomach, and fuels you for rowing longships or chopping wood. Not everything is bland. Salted herring is laid out in neat piles, oily and strong-smelling. You bite into one, the salt and fish oil coating your tongue. Viking preservation methods, smoking, salting, drying ensured food lasted through the long, dark winters. Imagine hauling barrels of fish up icy slopes to keep a village fed. Survival tastes salty, briny, and sometimes a little intimidating. Bread is present too, though coarser than anything you've seen. Flat, dense, and dark. It's made from barley or rye. You tear off a chunk and dip it into your porridge, which actually improves the flavor and gives it a pleasant chew. Vikings didn't waste anything, and trenchers were practically unheard of. Bread itself was scarce. You chew slowly, grateful for even this humble chunk. Meat arrives. Mutton, pork, occasionally beef if the family is wealthy. Some cuts are roasted over open flames, others boiled in stews with onions, leeks, and whatever root vegetables are available. You carve off a bite of mutton, chewy and smoky, the fat rendering with a satisfying sizzle. Fat was precious. It provided calories, warmth, and a little indulgence. In Viking winters, calories weren't just luxury, they were survival. Mainstream fact: archaeologists have discovered Viking kitchens with specialized smoking racks, salt pits, and clay pots for stewing. Their diets were surprisingly varied. Grains, vegetables, dairy, meat, and fish all had roles. Depending on the season and social status, the sagas even mention feasts where warriors ate copious amounts before battle-proof. That, Vikings took both nutrition and indulgence seriously. And Vikings loved dairy. Skyr, a thick yogurt-like curd, sits in a bowl, slightly sour, dense, and creamy. You spoon some into your mouth, noting the tangy richness. Cheese, butter, and milk were staples, and goats and cows weren't just for meat, they were a consistent source of protein. Imagine waking up, grabbing a spoonful of skyr before heading out to raid or herd sheep. That's fuel. Quirky tidbit: Vikings reportedly enjoyed a dish of pickled herring fermented with juniper berries. The taste? Pungent, vinegary, slightly sweet, and extremely challenging. You nibble a pea-sized watering butt. There's a curious depth of flavor. Historians still argue whether this dish was a regular meal or a special treat for feasts and ceremonies. Either way, it's memorable. Vegetables were seasonal: cabbage, onions, leeks, wild herbs. You bite into a cabbage wedge, simmered in salted water, slightly sweet and full of fiber. Vikings prized hardy greens that could survive frost. The diet was practical, but flavors were layered when herbs and dairy were added. Imagine a smoky longhouse, porridge in one hand, cabbage in the other, and a small mug of ale warming your throat. Speaking of ale, it's everywhere. Thick, dark, slightly sour, made from barley, sometimes flavored with herbs. Children sometimes drank it watered down. Adults, not so much. You sip, the liquid warming your belly instantly. Alcohol wasn't just pleasure, it was nutrition, and it helped stave off hypothermia. Some scholars argue Vikings drank more for survival than fun. But let's be honest, it probably did both. Your gaze falls on the hearth, where a pig is slowly roasting on a spit. Fat sizzles, skin crisping, juices dripping into the fire. The aroma is intoxicating. You take a cautious slice, the meat tender, smoky, rich with rendered fat. Imagine eating like this during a long, brutal winter. Every bite is energy, every crumb survival. Dessert, not in the modern sense. Berries, wild fruits, and honey-sweetened cakes appear occasionally, often during midsummer feasts. You bite into a small honey and berry pastry, sweet but modest. Vikings didn't have refined sugar yet, but the natural sweetness was cherished. Even small treats brought joy after months of salty fish, barley porridge, and smoked meats. A playful moment. Someone passes around fermented shark, a delicacy in the north. You hesitate, eyes wide, and taste a tiny piece. The ammonia punch hits immediately. It's almost unbearable. You grimace, realizing not every Viking delicacy was meant for casual enjoyment. Yet in their world, preserving protein for months sometimes outweighed taste. Survival dictated the menu. Historians still argue how much variety Vikings actually had. Some evidence suggests elites enjoyed feasts with fresh fish, meats, and imported spices, while the average farmer's table was simpler. You look at your bowl of porridge, herring, and skyr, realizing the truth likely swings somewhere in between. A rich tapestry of survival and indulgence, all wrapped in smoke and sea salt. As the night grows, the longhouse quiets. You lean against a wooden bench, belly heavy, fire warming your back. Outside, the wind howls across the fjord, but inside, the smells of roasted meat, smoked fish, and sweet honey linger. Eating here is primal, communal, comforting, and challenging all at once. You chew the last bite of bread, sip your final gulp of ale, and realize Viking cuisine is about more than taste. It's about endurance, ingenuity, and savoring whatever the North can give you. Eyes closing, you let yourself drift, warmed by fire, ale, and the memory of salty, smoky flavors. Remember Roman garum. Forget it, this is salt, smoke, and survival. And just wait. Tomorrow, you'll wake somewhere warm and bustling, with spices, sugar, and citrus. The medieval world gave you grit. The Vikings gave you fortitude. You stir awake to the hum of chatter, the aroma of sizzling food, and the thick, fragrant smell of spices. This time, you're no longer in icy fjords or smoky medieval halls. You've arrived in the bustling streets of a Tang Dynasty Chinese city. The air is heady with the mingling scents of ginger, garlic, soy, and fermented sauces, while the hum of market life pulses around you. You weave through crowds of vendors hawking dumplings, roasted meats, noodles, and strange, colorful pastries that glint in the lantern light. Here, food isn't just survival or status, it's art, science, and diplomacy all rolled together. Your first taste is simple. A steamed bun, soft, pillowy, warm, with a filling of minced pork and scallion. You bite in, and the juices spill across your tongue. Flavors are balanced, nuanced, subtle. Temp's Chinese cuisine already prizes harmony: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, all coexisting in a single bite. You chew slowly, appreciating the artistry in a dish that looks so humble. but delivers so fully. Even peasants enjoy the basics, but the wealthy elevate it with seasonings imported along the Silk Road: pepper, star anise, cinnamon, and ginger. Bread here is different. Flat wheat pancakes and layered breads appear, sometimes fried, sometimes steamed. You tear off a strip and dip it into a bowl of soybean paste, savory and nutty. For ordinary citizens, this combination fuels long workdays. For scholars and officials, it's an accompaniment to intricate banquets that demonstrate not just taste, but refinement, intelligence, and knowledge of culinary codes. You bite and marvel at the layering of textures: soft dough, creamy paste, tender pork. Vegetables are everywhere: bok choy, cabbage, bamboo shoots, leeks. You nibble a bamboo shoot, crisp and slightly sweet. Unlike the European diets you've endured, the Tang diet emphasizes freshness, seasonality, and variety. Fruits are prominent too. Persimmons, plums, melons, and jujubes sweeten both snacks and desserts. You bite a jujube, sticky and honeyed, and marvel that centuries before sugar came to the West, natural sweetness was cherished and celebrated. Mainstream fact: Tang Dynasty kitchens were highly organized, even in common households. Meals typically included rice or wheat staples, vegetables, protein pork, chicken, fish, eggs, and fermented sauces. Fermentation wasn't just flavor. It preserved food in a world without refrigeration. Soy sauce, pickles, and bean pastes created depth and umami that transformed humble ingredients. You taste a spoonful of fermented soybean paste with noodles and understand why it's considered a cornerstone of Chinese flavor. But the cuisine isn't all practical. Quirky tidbit: some Tang recipes included bizarre ingredients like camel's humps, donkey meat, and lotus seeds stuffed with dates. Exotic, unusual, and sometimes bewildering, yet they delighted the elite. You try a small bite of lotus seed dessert, its sweetness tempered by earthiness. It's peculiar, pleasant, and unmistakably refined. Historians still argue how much of this was everyday fare versus elite indulgence, but the creativity is undeniable. Street food thrives here. Vendors fry skewers of meat, roll pancakes filled with vegetables, or steam dumplings on bamboo racks. You grab a skewer of grilled lamb, smoky and seasoned with cumin and chili. It's spicy, savory, perfect for an on-the-go meal. You nod to the vendor, thinking of Viking smoked fish or Roman garum, and marvel at the evolution of flavor across continents. Rice is central. Steamed, sticky, or fried, it forms the backbone of daily nutrition. You eat a small bowl of rice with soy-glazed fish. The grains cling together lightly, subtly sweet, carrying the umami of the glaze. Rice isn't just sustenance, it's a cultural symbol, a connector of meals, markets, and feasts. In Tang society, owning surplus rice meant wealth, stability, and status. Tea arrives, fragrant and pale green, steeped lightly. You sip, the delicate bitterness cleansing your palate. Tang China is the era of tea culture, where refinement isn't just about what you eat, but what you drink alongside it. The ritual of pouring, savoring, and appreciating tea elevates a meal into a meditative experience. Even the humblest snack gains nuance when accompanied by tea. Quirky moment: some scholars of the time recommended snails stewed in medicinal herbs to improve health and vitality. You nibble cautiously, the texture slightly slimy, the flavor earthy. Historians still debate whether these recipes were common or purely medicinal, but they reveal an intriguing intersection of food and health. You realize you've been tasting centuries of experimentation, survival, and philosophy in every bite. Meat platters arrive: chicken roasted with spices, fish steamed in lotus leaves, pork braised with soy and honey. The smells are intoxicating. You slice a tender piece of braised pork, sweet, savory, slightly sticky. You savor it slowly, marveling at the balance of flavor and technique. Tang chefs prized presentation almost as much as taste. Dishes were shaped, colored, and arranged to please both eye and palate. Even a simple banquet is an aesthetic experience. Historians still argue whether commoners could access such variety daily, or if this was largely restricted to urban elites and court kitchens. You glance at the crowded market outside. Peasants nibbling buns, farmers trading vegetables, laborers drinking watered wine-like beverages. There's contrast, but also continuity, the same ingredients, the same flavors, just scaled to circumstance. Dessert appears. Candied dates, sweet rice cakes, glutinous pastries filled with bean paste. You bite into a sticky rice cake, sweetness coating your tongue. Honey and dried fruits add layers of flavor. Unlike Europe, sugar is rare, but natural sweeteners abound. You lick your fingers, smiling at the ingenuity. Even in a pre-industrial world, people found ways to end a meal with delight. Music drifts through the street's flutes, drums, and string instruments, creating a gentle rhythm. You lean back against a stall, belly full, head spinning slightly from flavors and spices. Meals here aren't just nutrition. They're culture, craft, and social connection. Every bite is a lesson in balance, preservation, and sensory pleasure. You finish your tea, take a deep breath, and realize Tang cuisine embodies both practicality and artistry. Grains, vegetables, meat, and fermented flavors sustain the population while inspiring culinary creativity. You savor one last bite of dumpling, imagining hundreds of years of cooks perfecting the craft, market bustle, palace kitchens, and family tables. This is food alive, layered with history, culture, and geography. As lanterns flicker and markets quiet, you drift toward a nap, still tasting soy, ginger, and honey. Remember the Viking salty fish? The Romans garum, the medieval trenchers. Tang China has its own magic. Balance, complexity, and enduring techniques. Your senses are full, your belly satisfied, and your mind quietly noting the incredible diversity of human flavor across centuries. You wake, your senses filled with the scent of spices, rice, and roasted meat, only to find yourself in the bustling kitchens of the Ottoman Empire. The air is dense with aromas cumin, cinnamon, sumac, grilled lamb, and sweet syrup. You step over rugs and low tables, dodging trays of baklava, simmering stews, and towering piles of bread. Here, food is an empire in itself. A fusion of cultures, ingredients, and techniques stretching from the Mediterranean to the Middle East. Tonight, you're tasting history's crossroads. Your first bite is a piece of lamb kebab, charred slightly on the edges, juicy and tender. It melts in your mouth, seasoned with cumin, coriander, and garlic. The meat is earthy and aromatic, the kind that lingers long after you swallow. The Ottoman kitchens prided themselves on layering flavors. You chew thoughtfully, recognizing the depth of centuries of culinary evolution. You sip a small cup of thick, tart yogurt alongside it, the coolness balancing the warmth and spice of the meat. Yogurt is everywhere here, a staple in stews, sauces, and drinks. Bread is monumental. Flatbreads, round loaves, stuffed breads, and crispy rolls cover every surface. You tear a piece from a thick, round loaf and scoop up a dollop of olive oil mixed with crushed garlic. The bread is chewy, slightly charred, and deeply satisfying. In Ottoman culture, bread wasn't just food, was sacred. To waste, it was taboo. You dip, you chew, and you savor, mindful that your humble trencher is part of a centuries-old tradition of reverence for grain. Stews arrive, simmering in brass pots. Chickpeas, eggplants, tomatoes, and lamb meld into a fragrant, tangy mixture. You take a bite of the stew, rich and earthy, and notice subtle layers. The sweetness of onions caramelized in oil, the warmth of cinnamon, the slight bitterness of roasted eggplant. You swallow slowly, appreciating the patience and skill that went into building these flavors. Historians still argue whether these complex recipes were daily fare or reserved for courtly feasts. But either way, the craftsmanship is evident. Street foods are everywhere too. You sample a small pastry stuffed with spiced meat and nut-soft dough with a crispy exterior. Vendors sell sweet pastries drizzled with syrup and sprinkled with pistachios. You nibble a piece, sticky and sweet, your fingers coated with honey and nuts. Quirky tidbit. Some pastries were baked in the shape of animals, symbolic of wealth and prosperity. A detail that makes you grin as you try to figure out whether you're eating a lamb or a cleverly disguised nut-filled cake. Vegetables and legumes are essential. Lentils, chickpeas, spinach, and eggplant are cooked in myriad ways. You bite into eggplant stuffed with minced meat and pine nuts. Its soft flesh and rich filling a revelation. You realize that while Ottoman feasts could be extravagant, even humble meals were balanced, creative, and deeply flavorful. Legumes and vegetables weren't just sides. They were stars in their own right. Rice plays a prominent role, often infused with saffron, dried fruits, or nuts. You try a spoonful of golden pilaf, fragrant with cinnamon and almonds. Each grain is separate, yet perfectly cooked, a testament to precision and care in the kitchen. You can almost taste the trade routes. Saffron from Iran, almonds from Anatolia, rice from Persia. The empire's vast network isn't just economic, it's edible. Quirky tidbit. Ottoman cooks sometimes included rosewater in desserts, lending a floral aroma that seems almost magical. You taste a small piece of baklava, honey dripping, pistachios crunching, a faint floral note lingering. It's indulgent, decadent, and utterly foreign compared to the porridge and trenchers you've endured before. You realize sweets here were about ceremony, prestige, and sensory delight, not mere nutrition. Mainstream fact: Ottoman kitchens were meticulously organized, with specialized chefs for different dishes, pastries, meats, stews, and breads. Culinary hierarchy was serious business, reflecting the importance of food in maintaining social order and imperial prestige. You watch a line of cooks move in choreographed precision, each aware of their role. The sheer coordination is mesmerizing. A platter of fresh fruit arrives: figs, pomegranates, melons, and dates. You bite into a fig, sticky and sweet, juice running down your fingers. You reach for a slice of pomegranate, the seeds tart and crisp. Fruit here isn't just dessert, it's color, texture, and balance for the palate. You savor the contrast to the rich meats, honeyed pastries, and spiced stews. Wine flows, sometimes diluted with water or mixed with spices, but spirits like raki and sherbets made from rose, cherry, or pomegranate are also popular. You sip a pomegranate sherbet, sweet, tart, refreshing, a perfect end to a complex meal. You lean back, full, grateful for the balance of flavors, textures, and temperatures, marveling at how ingredients from across continents harmonize on a single table. Historians still argue how much these elaborate feasts reflected daily life versus ceremonial indulgence. Likely, most ordinary citizens had simpler version stews, bread, legumes. Occasional fruit, but even in simplicity, the cooking techniques, spices, and creativity elevated the meals. You chew the last bite of lamb, sip your yogurt, and breathe in the lingering aromas, feeling connected to centuries of culinary tradition. As the night winds down, music rises, a ney flute, a tambourine, soft vocalizations. You lean against the table, belly full, eyelids heavy. Food here, as always, is more than sustenance. It's culture, diplomacy, survival, and celebration all intertwined. You drift into a gentle doze, tasting cinnamon, honey, yogurt, and saffron one last time, knowing you've traversed continents and centuries through flavor alone. Your journey slows. The sights, smells, and tastes of history fade into a soft blur. You feel your muscles relax, your belly warm, your mind drifting through remembered feasts. From Egypt's gritty onions to Mesopotamia's savory stews, Greece's figs and olives, Rome's lavish meats, medieval trenchers, Viking smoke and salt, tank dumplings to Ottoman saffron and honeyba. Flavors linger, subtle and vivid, like echoes of long-vanished kitchens. you take a slow, deep breath. Imagine the crackling fire of a longhouse, the bubbling stew in a Mesopotamian pot, or the gentle sizzle of Ottoman lamb on brass trays. Each aroma fades into the next, creating a quiet symphony. The tastes mingle on your tongue. Sweet, salty, smoky, earthy, pungent, delicate, rich. History is edible, and for a moment you feel connected to every cook, every diner, every hand that shaped, stirred, and seasoned the past. No need to rush. Let the soft rhythm of your breath match the slow unfolding of meals across time. Your thoughts drift lazily through spices, grains, and honey. Each bite, each sip, a story. Each chew, a whisper from the past. Remember the Egyptians' onions, the Greeks' olive oil, the Romans' garum, the Vikings' skyr, Temp's dumplings, and Ottoman rosewater. They are all threads woven into the fabric of human flavor. Feel your eyes grow heavy. The kitchen's quiet, the feast's end, the world softens. Your mind drifts gently, tasting history's final notes: sweet honey, tart fruit, smoky meats, warm bread. You sink into your pillow, full content, and infinitely connected to the long, winding path of human hunger, ingenuity, and delight. Now, dim the lights. Take a deep breath, and let sleep carry you through a night flavored by the centuries. Sweet aromas, rich textures, distant kitchens all fading softly as dreams take over, carrying you gently into rest.